Hello, firstly. My name is Aslan Odev, and I'll be hoping and really fingers crossed to try and link the stuff that you've seen yesterday, the amazing content and the ideas that Paul McGuinness has given us, and just really trying to give you an insight into how I've interpreted it, kind of give you some of the experiences that I've got in terms of what it might look like for the role of the coach, and how the coach might behave with this mindset. Really, the focus of this conference is to really try and make sure that we're working from a player-centered approach. So again, hopefully in the next sort of 20, 25 minutes, and with the practical later today, I'll give you, again, an insight into how that might look practically for you guys. As we sort of work through this, we're going to try and reflect on some of the practices that you might have done recently. If you're not actively coaching, then maybe try and think of something where you've seen a session. Don't try and use one of ours. Try and use one from your context and from your environment. And really just try and reflect on how that felt. How did the players feel in that session? How would you kind of gauge that? What kind of interaction did you use with the players? Was it more of a dictatorial, top-down approach? So was the coach giving the information? Were they imparting their knowledge onto the player and asking them to do it? Or was it more of a Q&A, a question and answer? Was it more guided discovery? Were the players able to explore during that session? And these are some of the topics that we might try and cover, and how the coach might behave and act in an environment or a learning environment that they're trying to create similar to that. So as we kind of work through this, I'll kind of be giving you my experience, but really try and reflect it and link it to something that you're kind of living in and coaching in. So in terms of the why and the aims of kind of what we're trying to look for and what we're trying to get after, we're really trying to make sure that we're trying to create independent thinkers. And I really do mean that in hopefully the truest version of that and the truest definition of those words. A lot of the time you'll see at clubs and coaches, they'll try and tell you they want independent thinkers, but after 5 seconds of awkward silence, they might try and fill that with a little bit of knowledge from themselves. And what we're really trying to go for here is understanding and appreciating individuals, and just really trying to give them the space and the time to think and just to explore and to really try and just slow down if they need that. And sometimes we might need to make it more complex, and we'll get into that as we move forwards. When players have space and freedom to think, that then starts moving into a place for them where they can start being more creative. I really believe you won't get creative players by telling them your version of it. By you giving them the solution, they're only going to have the potential that you have. They're going to be dependent on the coach. They're going to be looking for you on the sidelines, and we have all seen this. You know, the players are really trying to just waiting for the coach to tell them what to do, and that's not going to foster creativity. We want these players to find solutions on their own, have their own personality, and live through the experiences that we can kind of create and kind of encourage within our practice design and with our behaviors and language. In terms of where our intentions will come from, I try and use the phrase coach with love. And a lot of the time, I feel you can't really misinterpret that. If our intentions are to really try and look at the individual and appreciate them, and for us to really develop the player and the person, then that's going to be coming from a place of love and affection and appreciation and understanding. And again, that is black and white. That is really understanding that I'm not coaching here with ego. I'm not coming in here with my own status, with my own version of what football should look like. This idea of Sky Sports or the World Cup or what that looks like, you've got to leave that behind, and you've really got to try and look at the environment that you're in, the context that you're in, and the players that are under your duty of care. And again, we're going to try and understand these things and appreciate these things as we move forwards. The leaving the ego outside is something that really resonated with me when someone told me that. So when I was really trying to not get into coaching, but when I was getting into the academy environment, I was looking around and seeing other coaches and how assertive they were and how they linked the players' progression and learning or the result on match day to themselves and their own ego and their own status. You've lost it straight away. The development, you're hindering the players' development. They can't explore. They're always looking for your affirmation and your validation. They're looking for the coach to try and the adult to try and give them that allowance or permission to go and do something. And again, in terms of what we're trying to speak about at this conference, what we spoke about yesterday, we really need to try and make sure that the players are understood and they feel like they can do that. And again, coaching from a place of love. So we're going to start moving into the practice design. And as we kind of move forward, I'm going to show you the thought process and the why behind what I'll be doing later on. And some of the things that you guys might pick up. And what I really don't want to do is give you a recipe. What I don't want to do is for you guys to really take a picture. Obviously, you can take pictures, but what I'm going to show you is going to be something that from my journey, this is kind of where I've got to. And all of you guys will be in different parts of your journey. Some of you will be further ahead in some elements. And some of you will be kind of thinking, oh, that's a really good idea, and you want to try and use that and take that into your context. So before we start looking at examples, or an example, some of the questions that I ask myself and some things that I consider prior to going out onto the grass is, are we asking the players to think, or are we asking the players to remember? So we often see practice designs where it goes A to B to C to D, and it's a routine, and the coach will choreograph the session, and the players have to fall in line and kind of do that. And we're looking at players remembering at that stage. So we're looking at players not thinking, not perceiving, not having to adapt to anything. They're just remembering what the coach has told them. And if they don't remember that and they don't do it in the exact way their coach has asked, then they're a failure. And they're not learning quick enough. Oh, but he's done it. But when we really start coaching with love and we appreciate the individual, then they can start exploring things. Then we can start fostering creativity. And again, with the stuff that the guy spoke about yesterday in terms of, and even Paul speaking about creating these game problems within our session, and really trying to foster that and encourage that. That's how we can kind of get those things to manifest within our practices. Variation is something that I've really recently been trying to kind of understand and learn, and Wolfgang Scholhorn is here, and I'm sure will do an amazing talk. But with the variation, we're really trying to encourage players to become adaptable and skillful. And that can only happen through the types or the variation of the problem that they're trying to solve. If they're solving the same problem again and again and again, then they'll be really good at solving that problem. The game of football is dynamic. The game of football is unpredictable. Therefore, our sessions must look unpredictable and dynamic. And we can even go beyond that. So I'm sure we'll speak about it in terms of beyond representativeness and the variation of that, but also the variation of bringing it back to what the game looks like. So what's the player's diet? What are they getting from our sessions? What are they getting during the week? What are they getting during the season? How much variation have we exposed the athlete to? So we speak about Bernstein and the repetition without repetition. So it's not the repetition of the skill, it's not the repetition of the action, but the process of finding the solution. And that's really what we're trying to go after. Within our sessions, how much choice do the players have? And that can look a number of ways. But what we're really trying to look for, and when we start moving forward with our practice design, is if we're asking the players to dribble, do they have the choice to pass? Do they have the choice to dribble in a different way, a different direction? Are they really having to think about where they go, and they're trying to appreciate the value of each of those things, each of those decisions, each of those apperceptions and affordances and things like that? Or are they just remembering, is there only one choice? So again, it's important that within our practice design, we're allowing the players to find personality, find their own personality. Some of us in here would want to dribble. Some of us in here would want to take it at a really high tempo to go from slow to fast. Some of us here would want to connect with a teammate. You might see that solution in the practice and take that to the game. So how much choice are we giving the athletes, the players? And then from that, hopefully, they'll be fostering and creating and understanding and appreciating all of these things, but then ultimately having their own personality, not the personality of the coach, because I'm only giving them a select number of choices. These are the ones you can choose, multiple choice. I'm conditioning who you're going to be. So again, that links to the conditioning stuff. But again, for me, and one of the things I'm really trying to understand is the variation. So there might be moments where I might ask a player, or I might understand that the individual is doing something, so they're resonating in a different way with a practice or with a task. And I might go into them and say, well, can you just go and play two-touch for me? And the variation of that will get them to organize themselves and find different solutions. And then I might change it and remove it. So later we'll go on to look at challenge zone and comfort zone. And then the skill of the coach then is to understand the individual. So in the new role that I'm going into, I'll be sort of sharing my coaching frameworks, the process that I kind of go through and the influences that I've had. And this is one of them. So this is a part of it, this is half of it with the practice design stuff. And then later on, you'll kind of see the other side of it with the coaching behaviors and the relationship with the player. So with the practice design, top left, we've got the environment. So we're looking at emergent opportunities. So are the decisions the player's making emerging and going away, or are they brighter, or are they decaying, are they all of these things? But we're really looking for an unpredictable and dynamic environment. So the players can find solutions, they have choice, but the opportunities aren't the same every time. The players are really able to choose what they're doing, and then that will then shape their personality. And again, that will be guided by their abilities, their action capabilities. So are they strong? That will change how they play. Are they quicker than the defender? That will change how they play. Do they have a really good connection with a centre midfielder as a striker? That will change how they play. Okay, so those opportunities, they need to be kind of game relevant, but then also we can vary that and go beyond. Dimensions of practice. So how purposeful are we with the shape of our practice design? Is it going to be? We saw some excellent work from Jake yesterday where he was changing the shape of the practice, trying to really challenge the players to move and organize and scan and all of these things, but he's increasing the value of elements of the game. So rather than us telling the players what to do, we can change the environment, we can change the task, and then through that we can encourage these players to just kind of highlight it. And it's up to them kind of how they interact with that, how they find solutions, and then we can just be facilitators and guiders. But ultimately, it's their decision that we're looking for. Bottom left, we're going to look at the emotional context. So this is something that, when it gets to match day, there will be pressure. There is competition. It's the nature of the sport. So then how skillful are we in our practice design with that? So there might be moments where we might notice that the players are kind of getting really wide variety of solutions. They're really experimenting, they're exploring. Okay, well then let's increase the noise, increase the stress level by making it into a competition. The value of the opportunity then is higher. Are they still able to be brave? Are they still able to take risk? And then for me, that's the skill of the coach, and that's how we can kind of look at this in our practice design, and we can look at this prior and during the session when we're on the grass, and then we can reflect on it afterwards, once it's finished. We know on match day, you're 1-0 down, 90th minute. Each pass, each dribble, each possession, each tackle means a lot more. So the value of these actions and the value of these solutions and the decisions that these players are making is increased. They mean more in the 90th minute because the game state is different. How the game has panned out maybe hasn't worked for us, or maybe it has and we're really trying to hold on to the lead. But then how are we kind of getting the players to experience that in our training? So how are we increasing the value of each opportunity? One of the ways that I really like is attackers. You've got 8 footballs left. So rather than doing it in a timed way, so you've got 2 minutes, if you give it to them where they've got like 8 chances, 8 opportunities to try and get success or get a goal, they can take their time, they can explore, they can find solutions, but the value's still really high. They're still trying to figure this out together. Whereas if you time something, obviously that's more match realistic, but the way they explore, that would be very different. It starts to become erratic, which is kind of, you might want to try and go after that. That might be what your focus potentially could be. But how skillful are we as a coach to have these in the back of our minds and think about, well, what do the players need right now? How are they resonating with this task? How many solutions are they trying to find? And that can guide us as a coach. We'll go to the bottom right, so the information. So a lot of the guys spoke about it yesterday. So the ball, opposition, teammates, and space. I'm not going to bore you with the definitions of each of those. I'm sure you're fully aware of what those words mean. But then it links to us up here with the variation, and then how we can add variation to these things. So often in my practices, I'll change the type of football they're using. So we might start with a size 4 that they would use on match day, but then we might change that to using a futsal. And I'm not talking about in a futsal hall, I'm talking about on the grass or on 3G, they're using a futsal. And that will change how the players are interacting. That will change how the players are finding solutions. And then we might move it to a size 5. We can go to a tennis ball. And that's for you guys, for us as coaches, to be creative. And how skillful and purposeful are we with this type of variation that we're using? The opposition. So I was speaking to a few of the other guys, and one of the practices that I most recently did was a restart from goal kick, like a playing out from the back session. But the variation would be how many attackers they're playing against. So we might restart from goal kick. We're playing against the front 3, playing against the front 2, playing against a front 1, a front 5. So the players are having to find new solutions, but I'm not going to tell them how to do that. That's up for them to decide and share and collaborate. But the different challenges they're doing, that's on me maybe. I think you can really get to a place, and I managed to after a couple of hours with them, where the attackers were deciding how many players were going to press, how many players were going to try and defend the goal kick to try and win the ball back. So my role as the coach then, and I've completely facilitated. My role as the coach is then to observe, and I might start adding variation to individuals. So I might start going into the goalkeeper and go, I've noticed that. You keep doing this. Try and do this way. Think about this. Have you noticed this? But it's not, I'm not conditioning the goalkeeper. I might remove it, see how he figures stuff out, or I might go back in and change it again. Okay, but if you can get to a place of player ownership, where they're deciding their session, for me, that's kind of what we're aiming for. Because they're thinking independently. They're having to be tactically involved in the session. They're an active part of their own learning. They're having to be adaptable. So when it gets to match day, and they go, Coach, they're playing a midfield 3, we're midfield 3, we're matched up, can we change da-da-da-da-da? And then by the time they're adults, and you've already sort of done that groundwork with them and managed to get them to think in this way, I really believe that they'll become so tactically aware and so tactically adaptable that you get far more success. And again, with the space, we're linking to the environment, so how purposeful are we with that stuff? Are we encouraging and sort of highlighting these moments of the game? This is a session I'll be doing later, or a similar version, depending on goalkeepers and things like that. This is kind of the starting point of what the idea might be. Blue versus yellow. The objective for both teams, so there's an end zone player for each team. So there's an end zone player on the far right, so the blue end zone player's on the ball. Then you've got a yellow end zone player up here. And the objective for the blues is to pass to the yellow end zone player. So their objective is to lose possession. It's weird. Once the blues have lost possession, one of the yellows in the middle will rotate or swap with the yellow on the outside, and then he would step in. So that's how the session will flow. So then once the yellows have the ball, they'll try and pass to the blue end zone player. He will step in, and then they'll show a rotation. That's where we'll start. And I'll just kind of be observing and watching and kind of looking for how the players are organizing and what kind of solutions they're coming up with. And then we've got red lines and blue lines and all sorts of stuff going on that I'm ready and prepared for. So the red lines, I'm going to try and learn Romanian for red. And if I was to say red, the whole game will be played in between the red lines. And I won't stop the session. The practice will still be going. These guys will still be playing football while the shape and the dimensions of the pitch will change. So we're going to increase the value of body shape. We're going to increase the value of scanning. We're going to increase the value of positioning without me saying anything. How they do those things will be highlighted and be brighter than the other stuff that they'll be doing. And then we have the blue. So if I was to shout blue in Romanian, these guys will come up, so the two end zone players will come higher, but we have a wider pitch than the red. Okay, so the kind of solutions and the space available to them will be different. And again, I won't stop the session. It will be flowing. But I'll have to layer this practice. I can't go all in on this at the beginning. So I'll have to be layering the practice dependent on and guided by what I'm seeing, how the players are organizing themselves, what kind of solutions are they making, what kind of stuff am I seeing from individuals. And then from blue and red, I might say white, or whichever color cone I can find, and that will be really wide, really long, everything's in. And then hopefully it will get to a point where that's constantly changing. So I'll go red, blue, white, white, red, blue, and it will be changing the whole time. So again, the value of each of these moments, the value of the excellent stuff that Paul's mentioned about the positioning, the scanning, body shape, timing, all of these things are increased. And then how the players can function in that variability, in the variation of the practice. And then I'll kind of show you my role as the coach and how I can kind of not influence, but what my interactions will be with the players. One of the myths in football, this is a lot of information. One of the myths in football is that when you kind of take this player-centered approach, that you're not really coaching. You're just doing nothing. I can tell you right now that this takes hours of planning. It takes years of exploration. So while I'm stood there observing and being patient, I'm really trying to understand what's going on in front of me. I'm not stood there doing nothing. I've had employers, previous people at clubs tell me, and I've had job interviews where I've walked out halfway through where they've said, but then we don't really like coaches that, they don't do anything. So there is this perception and myth that if you're not shouting from the sides, you're not coaching. Well, what we're trying to do at this conference is reframe what that looks like. Reframe how we see the coach, how we see the facilitator, the great word that Debbie uses, and really trying to understand what our role is, how it looks like in practice design, how it looks like with our interactions and behaviors. Here we can see slightly different terms, and you guys can use this or throw it in the bin or whatever you like, but we have potential progressions, not progressions. So these are things that I'm kind of thinking about, that I've noticed in the past that kind of pop up more regularly when I do sessions like this, or focuses like this. So I've kind of got stuff in mind that I've got in my back pocket, but I'm also ready to be adaptable and just look at what the players are doing in front of me. Team and individual prompts, not coaching points. So I'm not coming in with a predetermined coaching point. Oh, I've got to get this out. I've got to make sure that they receive on the half-turn back foot and play forwards. That's not in my mind. It might be something I'm thinking about in some way, but it's not predetermined, and I'm not going to judge the success of my session on whether I get that coaching point out. These are just prompts, things and languages and interactions that I might use to get the players to think independently. So how do we challenge the player? How does it look like when I'm going in and speaking to an individual? Before we do that, we need to try and appreciate and understand, and Paul's touched on this just now, the process the players are going through. So what did they see? What are they seeing? What are they feeling? What are they hearing? How much information are they getting? This is a question that I'll ask my players before we kind of get into anything else. How much information have you got? They might say, oh, I noticed that the goalkeeper played me a straight pass, the right back was free, I didn't really see anything else. Okay, fine, no problem. Go explore again, but try and get more information. How often are you scanning? How often are you looking? What did you hear? Did you feel the striker come and press you? What side was it on? So I'm not telling them the solution, but we're just kind of looking at how much perception they've got. Then what was their decision? So what was their intention? Then how did they do that? It might not be a kicking of the ball. It might be a movement. But we're just kind of highlighting these stuff to them. And ultimately, that is all linked to how much information they have. So then this is kind of the process of what it looks like actively and my interactions with the players. So I'll be looking at highlighting their attention. So again, linking back to that perception stuff, so they're seeing, hearing, and feeling. When did they scan? How often did they scan? How long was the scan? Was the scan early? Was the scan late? And we're just kind of asking these questions and noticing that from the individual. So then the intention of the player, what did you try and do? Oh, I tried to play forwards. Tried to play a pass. I saw the striker running through. Okay, so you saw that. Your intention was to try and play the striker in behind. Fantastic. So we've got to a point where we understand what the player was thinking and feeling. I'm not making a judgment from the outside. What's he doing? Didn't he see the left winger? Because I haven't understood. I haven't asked the player yet. Apperception is a word that I'll try and use, and Wolfgang is the one who kind of showed me that, rather than affordance. So apperception will basically mean that we'll make decisions and have intentions based off of our previous experiences and what we see. So it's not just what we see that will make a decision, it's our past experiences that will also guide us and shape the intentions that we have. So if I've tried to play 5 through balls to the striker in the game and it hasn't worked, I might be more mindful of that. Or I might be a player and go, I need to make that pass work, so I might try again. But it's just us appreciating their experience and background as players, so what kind of coaching they've had as well through their football journey. But then also where they are in the game state, so what have they experienced in that game, what have they experienced that week. And it's for us just to try and understand the individuals slightly more, really getting under the first layer. Don't come in with preconceived ideas. And then the action, so the movement solution, how do they do that? That might be a change of pace. Could be how they pass the ball. But there isn't one way of doing something. Jake made excellent points about the technique yesterday, the technique delusion. And now if we funnel these players to conformity, to looking for one technique, or I would have done with the side of the foot, we'll never really know or see anything new. But also, they're playing through our personality as coaches. This was my solution, you've got to do that. That was a really good way of doing that. Whereas they can explore and experiment. So again, there's a couple of things to think about and to peel back slightly more. So in terms of the variation, I've kind of touched on it where we're looking at and appreciating and understanding the individual. And then only from that, I can then add variation to them. If I don't understand or think about what they need, what their patterns have been, what their behaviors have been like, what kind of decisions they've made, then I shouldn't really go in and try and change it. If I understand my players entirely, then I can go in and try and add variation to that. And that might look like a task. It might be changing the environment. And it might be changing the individuals that they're playing against. And that kind of links itself to co-adaptation. But before we get there, we're going to speak about challenge zone or comfort zone. And try and understand that learning can happen in both. So some of us in here, while we're playing football, you might find the challenge point too easy. So we might scale it up, add variation. But we also need to understand and appreciate that playing within the comfort zone is also learning. Where they can be more creative potentially. They won't resort to short-term success. They can try and figure things out. They can experiment. And that might look like playing an age group down. They might have more physical dominance, more physical superiority. The challenge zone might be that they play up, where they've got to find different solutions. But then understanding that the challenge zone, or the comfort zone, is also a part of learning, and is also a place of learning. Co-adaptation. So co-adaptation is how we learn from each other, or because of each other. So if we pair somebody up, so we might pair up a really fast fullback and a really fast winger. Because they're paired up, the types of solutions they both have to make will be different if they're playing against somebody who's slower. So how purposeful are we with our practice of that? Are we ready to adapt and change that during the session, who their sparring partner is, who they're playing against? But then also using each other, using the players in your environment to role model. And again, we're really trying to be careful and conscious of the conditioning stuff. So if we say, oh, Johnny here has played an excellent long ball pass, we have to understand that some of those players might try a long ball pass when it might not be their solution, because we're kind of conditioning and showing that that was a good thing that we liked as an adult and as a coach. So coaching behaviors. how that looks in practice. So we have to make sure that we're being patient. We're observing how the players interact. I spoke quite a bit about that. Understanding that we should be prepared, not planned. It's an excellent point that Jesse made from Craig Morris. That we need to be prepared in our session, not planned. And that can look like the session plan looking A, B, C, D, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and that's what we're doing. We have to be open and ready to adapt, but that's based off of what we're looking at and how we're seeing it. Taking time is better than time taking. So as we're going through our practice, we might have allowed or planned for 10 minutes or something. 3 of the players have figured it out. They need a new challenge point in 7 minutes. 5 of the other players they might get to that same point in 12. So we're removing the equity to learn by having structured, planned sessions and moving them on when we're ready, rather than trying to observe how the players are resonating with the task and environment. So again, it's that equity for everyone to try and learn, have access to our focus, and not us dictating the flow and the tempo of the session. And one of the things that the English FA have really tried to push is the ball rolling time. And they want coaches to strive for 70 or 75% ball rolling time. Does that mean I'm a good coach? If the football's in my session is moving for 75%, does that make me successful? I would say no. What we need to reframe it as is learning opportunities. So as you go and ask the players to go and grab a drink, that is also a learning opportunity. The ball doesn't need to be rolling for players to learn. But how skillful and purposeful are we during our practice that we're creating those moments? Layering the practice. So I spoke about it previously, where this practice might get to a place of real complexity. It might be quite a high stress level for the players, but that stress level might be on the red lines without the blue or anything else. So it's me being observant, being patient, but layering the practice so we can kind of gauge where the challenge zone is. Then if we need to, come back to the comfort zone. So these are some of the questions that I'll ask myself. And when we're thinking about at the beginning, when I asked you guys to try and remember a session that you guys did or you saw, this is kind of what I would do afterwards. So I would ask myself, how patient and observant was I during my practice? How much variation was there? Were the players thinking, or were they just remembering? What was the kind of information I gave? What were my interactions like with the players? Did I encourage and empower individuality? What did that look like? Did the players really have choice? Were they able to express themselves freely? How open and ready was I to adapt my practice design? Did I stick to a structured plan? If you want to, you can ask me these questions after the practice today. So if you want to, you can come and pull me, and we'll have hopefully a free conversation about it. So just to end, and this is kind of the penultimate slide, but this is kind of the coaching framework that I'm working from at the moment. Hopefully this will change and adapt in months, weeks, days after this conference. But we've already seen the practice design stuff on this side, and then kind of looking at the relationship with the player on the other side. So again, it's kind of making it and breaking it down with the challenge stuff, and that stuff at the top with the process of the player and how I might guide their attention and use skillful questioning or guided discovery. But really trying to understand and think about and debunking this myth that players who are just stood on the sides aren't coaching. We are, which we're really trying to. Really understanding and looking and observing the players as we go through it. And finally, these are the people that have influenced me. This is some really obvious papers that I've kind of read or leaned on or just kind of incorporated into my learning. There's loads of other stuff. There's amazing people in this room. There's loads of experience from the speakers that have influenced me previously and even over the past couple of days. But if I was somebody in the audience today and someone showed me this slide, I'd really want to be curious and just kind of reach out and touch on it or just kind of look at it if I wanted to. So I really wanted to include this. Just to finish, thank you for your attention. It's not quite as lively as Paul's, but I really want you guys to try and hold me accountable later on as I do my practice. Really try and come over and ask questions. If you don't want to, that's obviously completely fine. But I'd really love to share, and I'll hopefully share during the practice and during the interactions that I have with the players, the reasoning and what I've noticed. And if you guys notice anything as we go through that practice, please come over and share with me. But yeah, thank you so much.